Happy politics, and welcome back to another edition of BC Poly Hot Stove. My name is Maclean Kay. I'm the editor-in-chief of The Orca, and I am joining you live from my favorite building in Victoria, the beautiful rock pile that is the Legislature, here for a semi-virtual, semi-in-person sitting. I'm joined remotely in a socially distant manner by...
I'm Jordan Bateman, Vice President Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association, the Mighty ICPA. Maclean, I knew the Ledge was in session because you're wearing a tie.
I am. Technically, I don't even have to anymore. Oh. It's I don't know. I'm a dinosaur, I guess.
Right.
I'm not the only. There are one or two people here wearing ties, but not everyone. That's for sure.
You're old school, and I appreciate it. Adrian Dix answering questions in QP wasn't wearing his glasses, and I thought, bold move, Adrian, because I'm like, what looks different about Adrian today? Oh, he wasn't wearing his glasses. I'm like, he must be farsighted then. He's okay or whatever. So.
We were remarking on that. I actually kind of want to get a chance to ask him that. I mean, I actually don't think it's vanity. I'm wondering if it's a glare issue, or you're right, it's a farsighted thing. But like things like this that you'd never think of in a million years suddenly become kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, exactly. But I think we're going to talk about the new Ledge setup a little bit later.
Yep.
But Maclean, I just thought of a topic, and I'm sorry to drop this on you, but we got to talk about the Alan Mullen report, leaked to Richard Zussman.
Yes.
Apparently, the big road trip was all a way to somehow ceremonially or separate the ceremonial functions of the Sergeant at Arms from the person who actually runs the security of the Legislature. And to you, sir, I say, why bother? Like, who cares? There's not a lot of ceremonial stuff going on anymore for the Sergeant at Arms. Is it really that much of a bother for that person to put on the nice robe and carry the mace, once in a blue moon? I say no.
Well, I mean, you brought this up. I wrote a story about Is Politics coming back a week or two ago, and I mentioned the report was coming. I had heard that the recommendation to split the Sergeant at Arms into two roles might be a significant part of it, and I wrote about that in the piece. Alan reacted on Twitter saying, not true, but hey, make up whatever you want. I think that's verbatim. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to prejudge. I did say that my belief was that they would try and install Alan in one of the two, probably the non-ceremonial position. Maybe that's what he's reacting to. I don't know. Haven't had a chance to read the whole 55-page report yet, but it's out there. Someone got it. Richard Zussman got it. CTV got it. I'm aware of a couple others that have it as well. I think the idea was that CTV would have an exclusive. That didn't happen. They moved very quickly once they learned that Richard Zussman over at Global did. And this is a report that's been a long time coming. I mean, this road trip happened last summer, and we were originally promised it in September. Now, in fairness, apparently it was delivered earlier this year, so it's not now, but still substantially later than was originally promised.
Yes, and interesting that the Speaker's office didn't go to their usual repository of journalistic information, Bob Mackin. I think.
Well, they have a very good relationship with CTV, and so that is often where they will things like this go. So it was not a surprise that CTV was going to have an exclusive. But I mean, I don't know. And I mean this. I don't know. How Richard got it first, but I mean, Richard.
I'll tell you how he's Richard freaking Zussman, and that's what
I mean. It's
brown envelopes.
The rest of us can envy that man's sources, and so I mean, apparently he got it.
Yeah, well, good for him. It was it's interesting to see. Like, I think the speakers made a mistake by not putting it out to the public so that everyone can take a look at it. Instead, we're getting reporters' filters of it. But yeah, it's interesting that Mullen got caught in a little.
Well, I mean, I don't know what party was reacting to, and I didn't ask for clarification, so I don't want to call him anything. But yes, I did suggest that I thought this would happen, and that I did suggest that I thought that he'd be wanting to fill one of those roles, and maybe that's what he's reacting to, and fair enough. But that said, this was out there, and you know what? I've been talking to people on LAMC. They're not in any hurry to move on this. It's not a huge priority. There are bigger fish to fry right now. Yeah. And maybe splitting the Sergeant at Arms into two roles is a good idea. Maybe it's not. But I mean, it's just not something that's going to get moved up the chain right now.
Yeah. Look, I don't know. Why have two bodies doing the job of what one person does now? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, given the pandemic, given the spending crunch that the province is facing. Okay, Maclean, I've been watching Question Period these last couple of days.
Yes.
I've been enjoying the show. I would say the Liberals have won both days. The NDP have been, especially John Horgan, was back-footed quite a bit. He was on his back foot, swinging away, but swinging a little bit wildly. And it all comes down to this issue of employment insurance. And
Yes.
essentially, perhaps I'll describe it since we were one of the signatories to the letter.
Mm-hmm.
The letter went in from several business groups across the province, I think 11 of us. The vast majority of employees in British Columbia represented by these 11 groups. And it said, listen, you extended EI provisions, layoff provisions from 13 weeks to 16 weeks at the beginning of the pandemic. We're coming up to that cliff now of 16 weeks where we either have to businesses have to make a decision. They either terminate their employees, pay them severance and other costs involved with that, or I guess bring them back, but many businesses aren't able to do that. This is a big problem. Think of like an event company. I think Jazz Johal mentioned one in Richmond, Queensborough, 6 employees at an event company. Well, it's not their fault they can't do events. The provincial health officer has forbidden them from doing events. But they've come up to this, they're coming up to the 16th week. The events company owner does not want to lay off his staff. They're his people. They want to keep them intact, his team. But he's coming up to this thing where he's got no revenue. You can't bring them back. The kind of wage subsidy is very narrow in its application. There's no work for them to do, so even if he did bring them back, he'd be losing 25% of salary. So now he has to decide whether or not he terminates these employees, all of whom are on CURB or EI or I guess it's EI right now. This is a big problem, and it comes down to 2 things. Number one, we're breaking from what the feds have done. So
Yes.
this was a big issue Monday. It was a big issue again today. In the meantime, Justin Trudeau came out and said, we're going to extend this layoff period to 6 months for federally regulated employees. That includes employees in BC who maybe work for banks or airlines or airports, federally regulated workplaces. So that's now 6 months. But for some reason, Horgan just refuses to extend it beyond the 16 weeks. And, for him, it's just about pandering to his big labor base, the BC Federation of Labor, who would rather, see employers, I guess, go out of business rather than, have workers laid off any longer. So we're coming to a cliff here on Thursday where I guess the Premier is apparently meeting with his economic roundtable, which he disingenuously claims as a meeting of business groups, which actually includes all of the labor people.
I was going to ask if you were going to be attending this meeting.
We are not.
Or someone with ICBA.
We are not. In fact, in question period, he misled the House a little bit when he stood up and said, I'm going to be meeting with all these business groups on such and such on Thursday. Well, no, you're not meeting with all these business groups. You're definitely not meeting with ICBA, who is a signatory to the letter, but we're not invited to these meetings because we're not on your economic roundtable because your building trades buddies hate our guts. All right, we're okay. We're big boys. We're big people. We can handle the building trades being angry with us. But he's not meeting with us, and he's not meeting with 5 or 6 of the other groups on that list. He's meeting specifically with the 4 who are on his economic roundtable on Thursday. Look, the bottom line here is you're going to force these businesses to do one of 2 things. They're either going to go bankrupt, which is bad for BC, or they're going to terminate employees that they love, which is bad for BC. Extend it. It pains me. It pains me to suggest that anyone follow Justin Trudeau's lead at the best of times. Just follow Trudeau's lead. He's on the right path on this one. Get on with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those issues where you've seen some of the rhetoric on one side in particular, to be honest, saying, well, this is all about, employers just want to screw employees out of their rightful severance. I don't think it's that. I think it's that if a business has been mandated to close or at least operate in a much reduced capacity by the provincial health officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, why would you punish them for that? Yeah. Why would you punish them for their employees? This is an extraordinary situation. This is not giving license to an employer 5 years down the road to put somebody in in timeout indefinitely. We can work legislation around to ensure that doesn't happen. This is a special and unique time.
Yeah, and look, in the last 2 days, we've seen John Horgan and Harry Bains, the Labour Minister, get up in the House and claim a list of supports they've given to businesses. You'll notice most of those are tax deferrals. They're not actual tax forgiveness. They're not actual reduced payments. You'll notice that they often will include federal programs in there because they've done sweet FA in a lot of ways for businesses. Like they have not done that much provincially. They are having another round of surveys and consultation at a time where we need economic action. And it all boils down to their ideology. Harry Bains has said in meetings, John Horgan, you can tell by his actions, They do not believe that employers care about employees. They do not believe any employer could possibly be a good employer, and they do not give a damn about job creators or employers in this province. They care about the employees, their labor buddies, the workers in the federation labor, and they just don't refuse to understand that so do businesses. Like, you create a little team, you have your group, like you have your people, you care about them. Business owners do not want to terminate their employees. They're devastated by this, but they can't go bankrupt either. Like, you've got to give them an out here. So it's ideology. And I think it's one more thing, Maclean. I think it's a tax grab by the provincial government. And here's what I'd say. Severance payments are taxable, highly taxable. There's a person I know who got laid off from their job. A good paying job, 6 figures. They were given a severance of $30,000, and 18,000 of it, that's all they took home, was 18,000 of the 30,000. The other 12,000 disappeared to taxes. So, it's a tax grab. By terminating, you force a big payout, or you force a severance of, it doesn't have to be big, it can be small or big, but a big chunk of that ends up in provincial coffers. And, that's, this idea, this is where actually Mike DeYoung was wrong in the House today. He said he was perplexed by this because, this is something that can be done at, no cost to government. Oh, no, government knows there's a cost if they do this, and it's the tax revenue from those big severance payments that they would very much like to collect. So
I had not considered that.
Yeah, so, there might be a piece coming your way for the Orca by one Jordan Bateman on this. I'm working on it.
I miss that guy. He should write more often.
Yeah, he should. He's been busy. But anyways, there's that kind of issue going on. Look, Horgan's going to meet with these business groups Thursday, which is actually his employment roundtable, which includes lots of non-business groups. He's going to have to back down. Like, it just does not make sense to do something completely different from what Trudeau is doing. He's going to have to find a way to extend this slightly. It was another example of how bad John Horgan is on details when it comes to answering questions, either from the media or in the House. He was not up on the details of this program. He was not up on the details of when his government knew about this issue. He even caught himself up a couple times where, I think he called the letter salacious from the business group. Yeah. I can tell you, I know the policy people at every single one of those business groups. They are not salacious, and certainly not salacious writers. I love them to bits, but God help us, they are not this is not fiery writing rhetoric.
I read that letter. I mean, salacious was not a word that came to mind.
This ain't the political equivalent of 50 Shades of Grey, people. This is pretty tame. This is policy people trying to make a policy case. In fact, when the letter went in, the funny thing is on Monday, the letter went in, and it was, I saw it just before it went, and I was like, God, dang, I wish I could rewrite this and actually make it, more salacious.
It's not a quick and easy read. You're right. I mean, you kind of have to sit and pay attention and sift through it. That's some big, thick paragraphs there.
Exactly. But look, it's just, Horgan's ideology. So there's that. He didn't seem to know that his government had been, talking, had done the consultation with business. He seems to think Thursday is all about the consultation on this. No. Your government has been talking to these guys, these business folks, for a couple of weeks now, saying no constantly. That's why they had to get a letter in and release it to the press, and obviously release it to the Liberals in order to get some action. So employers need help. It is not the fault of the event company owner or the catering company owner or the tourist cottage owner that their business plan has been shot to hell, and that they have to lay off people that they love, staff that have been with them for a long time, that they are on the brink of going bankrupt. Jock Finlayson estimates 15% of businesses in BC that were alive on January 1st, 2020 will be gone by December 31st, 2021. And it's because of policies like this. And it just perplexes me that Horgan, on one hand, can pretend that we're all in this together when it comes to COVID, but on the economic recovery, he's very clearly saying it's employers versus employees. And that is not the way that either of those groups feel right now.
We have been talking about this on a related level for quite some time, where what the next election is going to look like, and what people are going to be talking about, what the campaigns will be about. And there's a big school of thought, and you see it whenever there's a new poll released, that it's all going to be about COVID, containing the pandemic, and that the boost in popularity that John Horgan is still enjoying today will continue through till the next election. And I think that you and I have agreed that that he may continue to be this popular through the next election, but it won't be for that reason. The next election is going to be more about the recovery, I think, and some of the good ideas and bad ideas and mistakes along the way, because I mean, you are right when you say that a lot of these things that have been deferred and pushed to later are going to come due eventually. And so there is a tidal wave of bad news coming in the economy that, I mean, yes, it's good that it didn't all happen when we were locked down, but still, there are things like this that are going to come due. I still think that the next election, whenever it is, I know you want to talk about this, will be more about the recovery than it has been about containing the pandemic.
No, you're exactly right. And look, already there's some research going on into this. C2C journal, it's called, had a piece looking at the cost of the pandemic and kind of comparing saved lives and between us and other countries versus the cost of shutting down the economy. And they calculated something like it costs us $34 million for every life saved during this COVID pandemic. I don't know about the methodology or anything like that, but there will be more studies like this digging into it. There'll also be more studies into, frankly, the NDP's actions in this. Like, we weren't flawless. Like, there were still mistakes made. We should have probably acted quicker on borders. Probably shouldn't have had, the dental. There were things like improvements, long-term care. We were very lucky to dodge the bullet there. So, there will be those kind of little issues here. But listen, no one 5 years from now is going to think to themselves, or 10 years from now, or 50 years from now, going to think to themselves, boy, thank God we had an NDP government during that COVID-19. They'll think, thank God we had Dr. Bonnie Henry during that COVID-19. Like, that will be the person who, wears the crown for this. That'll be the person who, if statues are still a thing in this day and age, a statue will be built of. Like, that is who people will remember out of this. And every day that goes by, I don't know, Maclean, things feel like a little bit more and more normal here. I know the Premier is going to roll out phase 3 tomorrow. The modeling, the pandemic feels a little bit further away every single day.
Yeah, and I think that in time, NDP strategists will come to. I think it was necessary and the right decision, to be clear. I don't want to say that they should have done differently. I think they made the right call, but not more closely identifying people like John Horgan with the containing the pandemic. Here, it's all about Dr. Bonnie Henry. Mm-hmm. And yes, Adrian Dix has been with her in the briefings and has done, frankly, a pretty good job in those briefings, but I think in the public's mind, it was Dr. Bonnie Henry. That's who you see murals painted of. With the federal government, it's, you saw Justin Trudeau each and every day. Even in Ontario, they had Doug Ford with the public health officer there, whose name escapes me. I think it was the right thing to do, but I don't know that they're going to enjoy, electoral credit, if you like, whenever the next election is.
I think Dix will get less credit than Nigel, the interpreter, right? Like, the sign language interpreter. Like, Nigel's more famous than Adrian Dix at this point. And better funny faces too. So this election is going to be about the recovery. Right now, we're at that point where the recovery, I think, feels weird. Like, there are weird common sense breaks. There are weird breaks with common sense as people walk around and get back to real life. Like, people are I think, very grateful and happy that there was not a massive outbreak due to the Black Lives Movement protests. Thank God. And I think that's fantastic. But people are like, okay, well, if there weren't outbreaks there for a protest, why will there be outbreaks if we have a church picnic of 200 people, socially distanced somewhat at the local park? If there was no outbreak there, why are we limited to 50 cars at a drive-in theater? And in fact, I think that right now, phase 3 includes opening movie theaters up. So why can we open movie theaters up and still only hold drive-ins to 50 people? Why are we allowing, no offense, tourist towns, why would we give financial help to tourist towns who refuse to allow tourists to return to their communities? And some tourist towns actually very, actually physically and like verbally abusing people who dare to stop in their town, right? Like, there's these kind of like common sense, like, why can't I go to church? Like, kids have been in school. There's no outbreaks from that. Like, why kids have gone to school? Why can't they play hockey? These are the questions. Like, there's these common sense breaks right now. And yesterday, Dr. Bonnie came out and said she's holding firm on 50 people. That's going to be the limit until there's a vaccine. No, like, sorry, doctor. Like, if our numbers stay low, you're going to have to open it up. Like, you are going to put churches out of business, temples, places of worship out of business, more, event companies out of business. Like, you are going to crush a whole part of the economy for no real reason. You you can't do that. And I'm old enough to remember when she first brought in the 50-person and then the 10-person limit, and she kind of hinted, hey, it's not really based on science, this particular number, but it's the number we're going with. I appreciated her honesty then, but now all of a sudden we're like doubling down, like, no, this is what's going on. There is no reason why you need to limit BC Place Stadium, an open-air stadium, to 50 people. And in fact,
that's a really good point.
We had the rugby sevens there, and no one caught COVID there. And so, you go, okay, well, why the hell can't we have the BC Lions play? I mean, you and I have been to Lions games. They're socially distant because there's so few fans there. But these are the questions. I'm really wrestling. I'm really wrestling with it. And I think the longer this goes on, the more these kind of common sense fallouts there's going to be, and the longer the bureaucracy takes to let people get back to normal, the more likely it is you'll see the NDP wear it.
Yeah, well, the longer people go, the more they'll notice the things they're not allowed to do. And they'll start wondering why. Because you're right, there will always be, well, if this, then how come not this?
Yeah.
And there may well be good reasons, but there's going to be a lot of them. And people will get sick I was sick to death of lockdown 2 months in.
Yep.
And I think people will be sick to death of, not going to picnics, not kids baseball season, all that kind of stuff. Come August, when you would be expecting to have enjoyed this for 2 months, people are going to start getting persnickety.
Yeah, and again, I come back to, she wants us outdoors, big spaces, few faces. Why couldn't the Harbor Cats play in front of 300, 500 people? There's space. Why?
Well, I mean, in that case, it's because the teams they play are all American, and the travel would be an issue. But yes, absolutely.
You know what I mean.
But the CFL is all inside the country, and I mean, your point is a good one.
Yeah, I mean, we're bubbling up NHL players. Apparently, Vancouver's now one of the final 6 cities. My sense is Edmonton's probably going to get it over Vancouver simply because I think that.
Because of the Rocky Mountains.
Wow, the Rocky Mountains. No, don't forget, Alberta put a lot on the line to get that arena through in Edmonton. And I wonder if Bettman may reward that. Who knows? Kids softball. My daughter's going to do 8 weeks of softball, no games guaranteed, maybe a game in week 7 or 8, maybe. And parents are being discouraged from going and sitting in the outfield and watching. Who cares? What are you going to do? Stop me from going to a public park? Not miles, but several meters away from anyone else with a lawn chair and a cold pop? Come on, give me a break.
Yeah, if that's not safe, then nothing is safe.
No, totally. If that's not safe, then we should all be locked up in our attics and let's just get on with it. So.
Which I don't want to do again.
No. Anyway, so that's my rant. Look, and again, with the modeling tomorrow, reporters, please, I'm begging you. It's about the hospital beds. It's not about the number of active cases. Well, it's not about the number of cases. It's about the number of active cases, but it's about the hospital beds. Flattening the curve was about making sure there was ICU capacity. The death rate is plunging all over North America, including the United States. Fewer people are dying, even though cases are up. We don't care about the number of cases. We care about the number of hospital beds that are available. That is what our number one concern should be. And anyways, I've ranted enough about this. And let me be clear, I love Dr. Bonnie. I think she's done an amazing job. And, there's always going to be Monday morning quarterbacks like me. But, now I'm coming into the common sense portion of this, and I'm like, okay, it's time to release things a little bit quicker here. This is being a bit crazy.
Oh, absolutely. We touched on this earlier when talking about what the next election will be. There's some speculation today that might be considerably sooner than most of us expect.
Yes. So the Liberals put out a press release today and a video of John Horgan at an NDP candidates meeting. First of all, how did they get that? But anyways, I didn't ask. But essentially, Horgan says to his candidates, be ready for an election this fall. Now, it's a little bit in the context of it's a minority government. Canada should always be ready for an election. Certainly, Andrew Wilkinson, I'm sure, has said at some point, be ready for an election. Now, he doesn't hold the levers to actually to do that election. But, listen, I think the Liberals, here's the political strategy behind this, I believe. The Liberals essentially want to make sure that if there is an election during the actual pandemic, that it is clear to the public that John Horgan's the one who put your safety at risk to go and vote. And it wasn't, Andrew Wilkinson, it was John Horgan and his nefarious plan to have an election that put you at risk to vote. That's why, they also released a little comment from Bonnie Henry that went to Elections BC saying, she greatly discourages, an election during a pandemic. Makes sense. You can't have people gathering and, gymnasiums.
Shaking hands, kissing babies.
Totally. Frankly, frankly, for Andrew Wilkinson, I think, campaigning during a pandemic actually plays better to his strengths than going out and doing like the retail politics side. Like for politicians like Horgan and Christy Clark, they're more about the retail and less about the details. For Wilkinson, it's kind of opposite. But listen, like this is all about the Liberals being able to say 6 months from now, if there is suddenly a snap election in the fall, or 4 months from now, whatever month we're in. Look, we told you, this is John Horgan's fault. He's been playing this from the beginning, and blame that guy. We're just, we're sorry we have to do this.
So this is more sort of publicly stashing a card to play later if need be, rather than an actual nefarious plot to have an election in September or November or whenever it is.
Yeah, I think there's seeding the field, not CED, but seeding, as in agriculturally, seeding the field.
Yes.
And then if an election grows 6 months from now, they can point to it and say, oh, well, you see, we told you so. I honestly think that Horgan has to go to October 2021. I don't think that fall election works in the pandemic. I think the spring election, hopefully we have a vaccine, but there's no guarantees. That could still be in pandemic, number one. And number two, he made such a big deal about, how you have to go to the fall because, budgets and all that stuff. So I don't think he wants to go then. I think the new Green Party leader is going to want a little bit more time. So then I think you end up in October 2021. And hey, kudos to him if he does go in October 2021, because very few people, including myself, predicted he'd go the full term.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I just don't see it earlier. I wholeheartedly believe that there are elements within the NDP who were sorely tempted at several points. Of course, sure. Yeah. And as a minority government, you always have to be ready because you never know, especially with the turmoil with their partners in the Greens right now. There's a leadership campaign, then Andrew Weaver left. But you're right. I don't see it happening. I don't think they could get away with. They'd have to engineer it, and the lieutenant governor has said that she's not just going to dissolve Parliament on request. They have to lose a confidence vote. There isn't one coming, other than the budget, which is going to pass. And you're right. They made such a fuss and an issue of not having elections right after a budget that they just can't do it in the spring. That's too big of an issue for them to just eat. I think it's next fall.
Yeah, and the media will ask them about budgets and, are you doing this to hide bad news? And it just doesn't work out. It won't work out. Can I give credit to a BC Liberal MLA who I've been a little bit critical of from time to time, but who's did a heck of a job yesterday?
Let's hear it.
Okay, so I don't usually tune in to second reading debates on bills because
you're in good company.
Yeah, because I'm a typical human being who refuses to do that. But I got a text from someone who happened to be watching, and this person said, "Hey, you got to pull Michael Lee's speech yesterday in the House on the second reading of the ICBC no fault bill." So I did, and Maclean, it is first of all, let me just say, I got one too. The ICBC Monopoly game arrived via courier, so I belong to the Illuminati now that have a game.
I don't want to take away from your point, but I have to share what happened to my copy. Is that okay?
And then
we'll talk about the speech. Yes. So this is true. After my thing on Twitter, and I guess there was a story on CTV and with Mike Smith on CKNW, I was approached via email by someone in Vancouver who said that they own over 40 different versions of Monopoly and regularly go to the Monopoly World Championships. Which is a thing that I didn't know existed. But anyway, he said it would mean a lot to him to have this, have a copy of this, and would I be willing to sell or otherwise let him have it? And after some back and forth, we agreed that a donation to charity would be appropriate. He came up with $100 for the Canadian Cancer Society, which I thought was great.
That's awesome.
And it's fantastic. And I'm very happy to say that it was off in the mail the next day to Vancouver, and I hope he enjoys it. You know what? It's such a cool thing, the game they made. It's very funny. But I have a couple copies of Monopoly as is, and obviously this gentleman was going to appreciate it far more than I was going to. And $100 for the Canadian Cancer Society, really, it's a good story. And I apologize for hijacking.
No.
I thought that was worth the interlude.
How dare you provide good news in the social conscious of this podcast? You know that's not what we're about. But anyways, I have a copy, and drop by the patio anytime at home, and we'll have a couple pops, and we'll play some ICBC Monopoly. Okay. Outside, of course, where it's safe, fewer faces, more spaces. Anyways, Michael Lee, his speech was excellent. You can see where Michael Lee, at one point in his career, was a very skilled lawyer. Like, he makes a case against going to no fault. And more importantly, he also makes a case against David Eby being the one to decide that they should go to no fault. So basically his premise is this. David Eby is essentially in a conflict of interest by being the Attorney General of the province of British Columbia in charge of the court system, while also being the minister responsible for ICBC, because ICBC is such a user of said court system. And so by changing the court system rules and laws, by exempting ICBC from certain things, he's actually weakening the legal system, weakening people's rights to justice, and having troubles wearing the two different hats. It's an interesting argument. He makes the point that the Attorney General is supposed to stand up for the law, but rather than stand up for the law, the Attorney General is seeking to tear it down in the name of ICBC's balance sheet. That was one point. The Attorney General is supposed to stand up for courts and the rule of law, but rather than stand up for courts and the rule of law, the AG is actively taking steps to make it impossible for British Columbians to access courtrooms in search of fair compensation for their injuries. The AG is supposed to stand up for the basic legal rights of citizens, but rather than standing up for those rights, they've gone farther. EB's gone farther than any predecessor when it comes to diminishing the legal rights of vulnerable and injured British Columbians. Interesting argument. Then gets into the actual no fault. Points out David Eby's stark raving hypocrisy on this issue, where just last year in the House, David Eby's standing up saying, any idea that we'd ever go to no fault is pure fiction. That was Eby's quote. Well, we do live in a weird year where the fictional becomes real, and clearly did on this. Quotes Eby, I don't see no fault, as some people do, as a panacea for the system, and yet there we are. And then he kind of goes through and just carves up the bill, like talks about how there's 41 times in the bill where it says it'll be subject to regulations, which means cabinet sets price guides and whatnot for injuries. Brings up electoral reform and Eby's poor handling of that file, lauded by the Globe and Mail as the least honest attempt at electoral reform in Canadian history. Gets into ICBC's historical conduct, corporate culture, and how they don't give a darn about victims, right? And now all of a sudden you expect that they will. That doesn't make a lot of sense. And gets into this idea that you're, especially for the young, you are grossly underestimating their future earnings potential. And this is where it kind of struck near and dear to my heart, is I have a 17-year-old daughter. Mm-hmm. At some point, if David Eby can bother to get it together, she will have a road test and get her N. And she will be driving. And she wants to grow up and become a midwife. Very exciting. If she's in school and making maybe $25,000 a year on a side job while going through school and gets hit by a car, they will calculate her income based on the $25,000 she makes now for the rest of her life. And that does not make sense. If some drunk driver takes away, my little girl's ability to make money for the long term, I will burn the province down. This is craziness. You have to have the right as a victim to go out and sue the person who did you wrong. And instead, you're basically capping this. And Eby will say, oh, no, you're wrong. If it's a drunk driving conviction, you can go out and sue that person directly. Well, first of all, it is very difficult to get a vehicular conviction in this province. Saskatchewan's experience with no fault proves that very rarely do they actually bother to go and charge these drivers anymore and go on with these things. And that person will be out of luck. And, there's a line in here where, it's crazy. I should have flagged it. But essentially, Mike Lee makes the point that, this whole system, here he goes. This system discriminates in its treatment against children, students, stay-at-home parents, part-time workers, higher earners, women, minorities, and people who are retired. It virtually discriminates against everyone. That's how bad this bill is. This is how bad no fault is. So kudos, Michael Lee. This is why a lot of people voted for you to be leader of the BC Liberal Party back in that race a few years back. This is very thoughtful. It was clear he had time during the pandemic to think of these arguments, to research them, and it reads more like a very interesting legal brief than a boring second reading debate speech. So I just want to give a shout out to Michael Lee for standing up for the rights of victims and standing against this weird move to no fault.
As I said offline before we started talking, that I hadn't actually read that speech yet.
I wouldn't have either.
No, yeah, it's rare to catch these things in full because usually they're pretty boring. But this does sound like it's worth checking out. And I mean, I know that for a long time now they have, and by they, the BC Liberals have used Michael Lee as sort of their point person on David Eby, not personally, but as the Attorney General because he's a trial lawyer.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that is the reason why.
It's a good piece. It's a good, I think, 22 pages, so a little long to. It's a long read, but well worth the read. Maclean, how's the new ledge setup going? How do you feel?
You know what? It's slowly getting used to it. The house itself, the chamber, is a maximum of something like 23. There has to be like 3 desks apart, and but there's 4 big screen TVs where you can watch those who are attending on Zoom, and it works okay.
Can
There's
you see
a
the
lag
TVs
between...
okay? Can the MLA see the
What's
TV? Can the MLA see the TVs okay? They seem small, those TVs, like from the pictures.
Yeah, if one person is speaking and they're highlighted, then yeah, it's like I don't even know how to describe or even guesstimate how big they are. I think they can make out the face. But the problem is, as I noticed watching in the gallery today, there is just the slightest lag between the audio and video. And so if you're watching, I mean, just watching Adrian Dix answer a question today, and there's just the hint of a lag between his lips and the words coming out of his mouth, and it's just enough to be slightly disconcerting. Not disconcerting, but it throws you off.
Yeah.
And so you actually understand it better if you look away and just listen like it's radio. And it was funny because at first, all the MLAs were turning around and watching, and you could see them one by one, almost involuntarily, their heads would go away, and they either just do this or this. And it's because they're listening, and it's the best way to listen, but it looks like they're ignoring it. It's actually kind of funny to watch.
Yeah, what I found interesting too was like we kind of led to believe that the minister who would get the question would be in the House, but Dix has answered questions from, is that his office at the Ledge?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Now with Dix, I believe it's because he's a diabetic, and so therefore, he's immunocompromised. I think that's the reason they haven't said so.
Sure. Was Carol in the House? Carol James?
She is.
And she's in the chamber.
Yeah.
Wow.
She is. I know.
She's brave. I have a lot of respect for that.
I do as well. I was surprised to see her. She hasn't had to stand up yet. And there is a decent amount of distance between her and everyone else, as there is for every MLA. But I was surprised. That's brave, especially if she doesn't need to be there to talk something specifically financial. But I guess they're thinking there's always a chance she'll get a question. But Adrian Dix has had questions 2 days in a row, and he's in his office.
Yeah. So are the far-flung NDP ministers there, like the Michelle Mungall's?
I haven't seen Mungal see ministers. You see Farnworth in there because he's the House leader.
Right.
I think you'll see him every day. Horgan, Eby, Harry Baines was there.
Yeah.
And then, let me think, Melanie Mark.
I thought I saw Lisa Bear.
You may have. Yes, I think you did. And then there's a couple backbenchers. Gary Begg is there and a couple others. Sonia Firstenow is in the House. And then it's, a similar sort of random selection on the BC Liberal side. It's obviously Andrew Wilkinson is there, and Mary Polak also as the House leader, but then it's, it's changed a little bit. Or has it? Peter Millibar's been there every day. Norm Letnick.
Well, Shirley Bond was doing her questions from Prince George.
Yes, she was. So it's hard to say. And in most cases, you can tell, especially with the ministers, if they're in their office, just because all the offices kind of look the same. But the ones who are at home kind of stand out in that respect.
Yeah, well, I do enjoy Shirley's background because I think she's got a big sign that it's complimentary of grandkids, like grandkids are the best part of life or something like that. And it's just such a typically awesome grandma thing to have, which of course is, Shirley in a nutshell. So there's Shirley carving up the NDP with her like grandkids are the sunshine of my life sign behind her. Love it. Rate my room. I rate that one a 10.
Covering it enough that you can still see it's there.
It cracks me up.
It's been weird. I mean, to ask your question, what it's like, the biggest difference is we can't do scrums.
Yeah.
We can't, and that hasn't been an issue yet. And as I wrote last night, and I was telling Jody Vance this morning on the radio, it's fine as long as everything's going more or less normally. The big issue is going to be if something like a scandal breaks.
Yeah, like Ginny Sims Day, but a couple years ago.
Exactly. Yeah. Because two things will happen. Both the reporters will have to resist the temptation to run down into the halls which I think will happen. I think they'll resist it, is what I'm saying. But also in that case, the government. But if it happened to the other parties, their caucus will have to resist the temptation not to turtle, and actually put up the MLA in question, and then make it not 30 seconds and 2 questions.
Yeah.
It'll be, if something like that happens, that'll be the test, because they could well say, you know what, we would rather take the heat of hiding and not putting them up than getting hammered. And that might well be a calculation they'd make.
Well, I can hear Vaughn sharpening his knife if that happens. Are they doing now? Are the ministers doing it by phone, or is it like one general place every day?
It's one general place. It's on the entrance into the library. Right. There's a hallway there where they typically do regular scrums, and if it looks exactly like a regular media avail, there'll be a minister standing behind a microphone, and there is a single camera person, and I believe a single staff person, and they take questions on the phone. We don't have to tell them in advance what our questions are, but we do have to indicate that we'd like to ask a question.
Oh, that's fair. And do they, are they scheduling these like one after the other, like for the big, or is it just like the gallery says, wow, we need to talk to...
Yeah, it's both. There are scheduled avails for instance, Selena Robinson and Carol James had announced they would do one themselves because of the legislation introduced today, and there'll be normal events like that. But we are encouraged to email government staff and also the 2 opposition caucuses if and when we want to speak to anyone, and they have been setting them up. And then it's just a question of dialing in and either listening in or asking your question. And through 2 days, it's worked fairly well. But again, there hasn't been that acid test.
Yeah, it also hurts the smooth operators who work the media a little bit and like to chat. And where it's going to hurt is off the record stuff, right? Grabbing someone who's walking down the hall and they slip you a little info or something.
100%. And I mean, I've already missed that a little bit. And even just seeing them on a day-to-day basis is it's just different. It is set up explicitly so that you don't have to come in. Right. And I respect that. And Richard Zussman, who's the press gallery president, has done an amazing job making it so that you can indeed not be here. But, it is hard to replicate something like Zoom and calling in for press conferences. It just doesn't take away from what you can see by being here with your eyes. Again, I don't know what else he could have done differently. Nothing. He's done an amazing job. But it's just unfortunate that this is going to be the new normal for the foreseeable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, one more question. Shannon Waters on Twitter says there's a phone in the press gallery that's been ringing for months.
It's been fixed, but she was right.
Okay.
I noticed it ringing weeks and weeks and weeks ago. But it's in one of those old. You've been up to the press gallery. Yeah. There's those old phone booths. It's one of those. And when the door is closed, you actually can't hear the phone. Right. You have to be standing immediately outside the booth where no one sits to even notice. Right. So it's just very odd. Like you could sort of just hear it, like something, but it's far away enough that you're assuming it's downstairs. But yes, Shannon was right, and we eventually called building services, and it took them, 5 seconds to fix it after we were standing around like the Neanderthals in 2001.
Hilarious. Hey, one more thing, Maclean. You see my tweet went viral about my kid?
Yes.
Hilarious.
Yes, that is amazing. She's one of them. She's one of the. She was at the Tulsa rally.
Well, apparently. Okay, so here's the hilarious thing, right? So, first of all, I very rarely tweet about U.S. politics because, number one, I find it a bit annoying when Canadians sanctimoniously talk about other countries. Number two, I just don't think it's worth the time or energy, right? Like, these people who reply to every Donald Trump tweet, God bless you, but you're crazy. Like, that is just, he's not reading it. Like, who cares what you have to say, Joe?
I couldn't agree more.
So I almost never do. But, it's Father's Day. And somehow the Trump rally came up, and he's like, "Oh, I had two tickets for that." Wait, what? She's like, "Yeah." She's like, "I saw it on TikTok. I thought it would help, so I looked up a Tulsa zip code, and I got myself 2 seats." And so I, tweeted out like, well, my kid was one thing. We live 3,000 kilometers away in Langley, BC. That's all. Like, no judgments or anything like that. Yeah, it had 8,000 likes on Twitter.
That's amazing.
It's like added 85 followers to my Twitter feed who are going to be sorely disappointed by my ongoing Packer obsession, BC politics obsession, and Canuck lamentations. Like they're going to be like, these people are going to flee pretty quickly once they realize what I'm about. But hilarious. And that's when it occurred to me, that's why people tweet about Donald Trump.
Yes. Well, I mean, because it gets attention. And wow, your daughter, that's amazing. So you didn't know she had done this. She just sort of did it on her own volition. She didn't say, hey, Dad, I'm going to do this. What do you think?
No, just did it. Saw it. Thought it was great.
That's awesome.
Wanted to do her part for, on the Black Lives Matter movement and things like social justice. Like, good. She's a good kid, right? So it was pretty funny. Like, oh, she's like, yeah, I had 2 tickets for that. What?
Is it like, did she get like an email with like printable tickets or something? Or
I didn't see it. She got a confirmation. Like she's got
to print that out. Like that's a souvenir. Like that's
it's pretty funny. And like here's what I really loved. Like forget the politics angle. What I loved was as a backroom campaigner. As I've worked on many campaigns in my day. You always kind of talk about like, oh, if only we could put a hostile crowd into that. But no one ever does because no one can ever motivate those sorts of groups just to show up. God bless the TikTokers. Somehow they did. And they actually did the very thing that we've all dreamed of doing as backroom campaigners. And I, for one, say, well done, Zoomers. I appreciate that.
That is impressive. And I mean, until extremely recently, I thought Zoomers meant like seniors.
Baby boomers. We got the baby boomers. We got
right.
The beloved Generation X, of which I'm a part. I believe you're a millennial. Are you
no, I think I'm Gen X.
How old are you,
1976.
Okay, good. Yeah, well, you're my age. So yeah, we're Gen Xers. The forgotten generation that holds the entire world together. That's what we do.
the meat generation.
All right, that's all I got.
That I can't think of anything that's possibly going to top that. I am at Maclean K. He is at Jordan Bateman. There are no underscores on this podcast. And thanks again for watching. We'll see you next week.